an epiphany I had yesterday. An epiphany I had in church. Now, there is going to be religious content to this discussion, and I want to say what I'm going to say is always my disclaimer. You do or don't do whatever it is you do or don't want to do. Seriously, I want you to be happy. Find out what you're happy with and, all my best on that. I'm Christian, and I've talked before about how I left the Catholic Church. My family and I left the Catholic Church when the Conference of Catholic Bishops basically decided to go to war with Joe Biden. And that was enough for us. And we weren't the only ones. A lot of people have left. And I found a lovely little Lutheran church named Westwood, that is Westwood Lutheran up in St. Louis Park. And it's fantastic. I love going there. It's a very good church. Because I come from the religious philosophy as a Christian that Jesus was about loving, caring, compassion, welcoming, peace, that sort of thing. Not, let me tell you who you need to hate now. Taylor Swift is the devil. That's not the Christianity I ever learned, read about. I've read the Bible, and I don't think a lot of people who claim to have read it on the right have read the Bible, but I've read it, and it seems to be, about peace, love, and welcoming, inclusion, diversity, equity, that sort of thing. The stuff the Republicans hate. There have been, I want to preface it by saying, once again, religious thing. And I also want to preface this by saying sometimes the answer to a question is not nearly as complicated or diluted as you think it is. Sometimes it is just right in your face. And that's what happened yesterday, as I finally figured out something that I've been wanting it to be far more complicated. And the reality is, through the sermon I heard yesterday, I realized what was standing in front of me the entire time, what the difference is between one side of this country and the other side of this country. Now, my confusion and my questioning started a while back in regards to the COVID response, because I was always flabbergasted about the way elements of this country reacted to this, that suddenly vaccines were the big enemy. Which, by the way, they praised when Trump was in the White House. And then the minute he got out of the White House, because he used the vaccines and the COVID crisis as a political weapon, they all of a sudden became bad. There was a lot of people that adopted the mentality of, I don't care. I want to go get my chicken wings at the sports bar, and that's just that. And I don't care how many people die. Or, I don't care what my company's policy is. You got to let me in there unvaccinated and unmasked, and I don't care if I get other people sick. That's the deal. And what you had was selfishness. Basically, it was selfishness and ignorance, and they wanted the rest of the world to validate it for them. They wanted the government to basically say, oh, yes, being a stupid idiot and spreading a disease during an epidemic is a really good idea. They wanted other people to take the blame for their stupidity. They wanted their companies to say, okay, yeah, you have a valid opinion, so we'll let you in. And if everyone gets sick, you're off the hook. And that's what it was. It was selfishness and ignorance, but they wanted to be validated. And when the rest of the world didn't validate them, they started grunting louder and louder and eventually started coughing louder and louder. But you see, needless to say, the entire concept of, I don't care about the elderly. If they all die, I don't care, was something that I never thought in my life I would ever see orchestrated as a major talking point within this country as far as one side of the political aisle. Just take grandpa, put him on the Viking ship and light it ablaze and bon voyage, that sort of thing. That didn't seem like the America I'd known, and it sure didn't seem like anything Christian that the so-called Christian right was pushing. But this is kind of, and it's kind of one of those things where I've tried to figure out an answer to this in regards to the question of what is the difference between the Democrats and the Republicans, because it's easy to sort of say the deplorables, and they all love Trump. But the reality is it's sometimes I was kept thinking this is much more of a nuanced thing. Then I saw an interesting video, and this is a video that I have shed tears over. It is Taylor Swift. And if you've not seen the video, I'll post it up on the socials a little bit later on. It's her at one of her Eras Tour concerts, and there is a child in the front row who is clearly going through a health crisis, um, clearly a sick child, who is in the front row, and Taylor Swift comes down and sits down, gives him a very big hug, and puts her hat on her head and says, "Thank you very much for being here." And it is truly the pure joy that this child is having at that moment is spectacular. And it's something that is beautiful, and it is truly love. And it's kind of one of those things I think about it a little bit as a parent, because for just a brief moment, that child, those parents, everyone around this kid forgot about what was going on in their life for just a few minutes. And my God, bless Taylor Swift for that. There's another thing on top of this question I've been rolling around in my head for the last 4 years about how in the world did half this country get to a point of such selfishness and ignorance that basically the concern about other people during the COVID epidemic did not matter to them. And it didn't. It just did not matter to them. And that blew my mind. Another thing that happened is, of course, the Taylor Swift video I mentioned, where she goes on out there and gives a big hug and a greeting to a kid who's clearly going through a fairly serious medical crisis. And God bless her for it, because I think to myself, not only for that kid clearly all of a sudden forgot about all the problems they have in their young life, but the family of that child, because the video comes from, I'm presuming, the parent or a caregiver of the child who is there filming it. And at least for a few hours, they forgot about what has been tormenting them in their lives. And as a parent, I can't even imagine how nice that was to not have that front and center just for a few minutes. And of course, depending on the post of the Taylor Swift video, you will see quite a few people insulting and ridiculing and just going at it. And like, how did we get to this point? And like I said, I've been going back and forth because I keep thinking to myself, this is something far more nuanced and everything. Now, I'm about to get into some religious content. Forgive me. I am a Christian. I go to church. I know you guys on the right should try it. I went to church yesterday, and the pastor had a sermon where he brought up John 13, 34, 35. And once again, my job here is not to convert you or anything. I'm just talking about this perspective, because this perspective it helps me understand the world that we're living in. And it also, once again, gives me faith that the absolute distortion and abuse of the Christian faith that has happened at the hands of the right wing in this country can be undone. Just for those who don't know, John 13, 34, 35. Here you go. A new command I give you, love one another as I have loved you. So you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. Now, let's understand something about Jesus and who he was. He was not a person that would walk up to someone and give him a hug and say, hate the sin, love the sinner. No, he wouldn't do that. He just sat with people, talked with people, welcomed people, cared for people as they were. He welcomed them and loved them for who they were, because he understood everyone's relationship here is a personal one. And he never, he didn't condemn the people that the right wing tell us to condemn. He didn't like the scribes and the Pharisees and the hypocrites. He didn't like those. He repeatedly went after them for the people that were basically sitting on a throne pretending to be religious idol when they weren't. They weren't even following the basic tenets of that. Sound familiar? Yes, it does. He did not like selfishness. He did not like greed. He condemned hating others, and he sure as heck condemned the judging of others multiple times. The man that makes Christians did all these things. He did not condemn the LGBTQ population. He did not condemn abortion, even though it was a common practice back then. At no point in the Bible, in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the story of Jesus, does he do that. He just told us what exactly he wants us to do, to love people unconditionally, to do that. And that's when it hit me. That's the difference. Now, I could play this out in a fairly heartless way and just say, one side loves people and one side hates people. To basically calm down the rightos whose heads are exploding right now, I'll say it this way instead. I care for people. The other side really doesn't. And that is it. Like I said, sometimes the answer is very basic and it's right in front of our faces. When I sat there during the COVID pandemic, and every day I said, I don't want you sick. I don't want you to have long COVID. I don't want you to be dead. And I don't want you to be bankrupt from medical bills. I didn't say that because I disliked you. I have the basic common core decency of a human being, and I did not want you to suffer. I cared for you. I loved you. I did not want you to die. And that goes for every single one of you. I didn't. Rather, if you're one of the most far-right Christians or the far-left progressives. I didn't want you dead. I didn't want you broke. I didn't want you sick. I want you to have affordable health care. I want you to have decent schools. I want you to have good jobs with decent wages. I want to help you. What does the other side want to do?